A racist restaurant owner named Henry rejected an elderly black couple from dining in his restaurant, convinced they didn't belong in his upscale establishment. A few days later, Henry is shocked to discover who they truly are, and what they did next leaves him stunned. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Henry Parker stood at the doorway of his restaurant, the Golden Fork, and looked at everything with a critical eye. The smooth marble floors sparkled as they caught the soft light from the crystal chandeliers. Each table had a clean, crisp white cover that had been ironed just right. For tonight, everything had to be just right. His heart was beating fast with excitement because in just a few hours, a lot of people would be eating at his diner. Henry put his designer tie back in place and brushed out his tailored suit. He smiled a small, happy smile. In a sharp voice, he called out to a waitress walking by, "Emma, make sure the champagne is just the right temperature." "Mr. Donovan deserves the best," she said. The young woman quickly agreed, her eyes wide. She quickly left, calling out, "Yes, Mr. Parker," right away. As she ran off, Henry noticed a noise outside. He could see a homeless man walking along the sidewalk with a shopping cart full of broken things through the big front windows. It made Henry's lip curl in disgust. He yelled at the maitre d', "John," they told John, "get rid of that eyesore before our customers come in. We can't have that kind of scum hanging around." John thought about this for a moment. He said, "Sir, he's not really causing any trouble," but Henry cut him off with a sharp look. "Did I stutter? Our image is everything." Henry turned around to look over his area as John reluctantly left. He had given up too much and worked too hard to let anything stop him. Now that he had the Golden Fork, he was sure he would stay at the top. He was filled with joy as he thought about how far he had come from his humble beginnings. He turned this place into the town's talk of the town. He was about to do even bigger and better things. Henry smiled a small, happy smile to himself. He had worked hard for this success, and he deserved every bit of it. Late at night, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the Golden Fork. The beautiful couple, Benjamin and Diana Thompson, who were in their 70s, walked out onto the path. Diana looked at the outside of the restaurant with twinkling eyes and said, "Well, this certainly looks promising." Benjamin said yes, and a small smile played across his face. "Yes, it does, my dear. Shall we?" Benjamin held the door open for his wife as they walked up to the front door. They had built a huge business together over many years, but not many people knew their names. They liked to stay out of the spotlight, especially when they were thinking about making new purchases. The diner was busy on the inside. The air was filled with the sound of glasses breaking, people talking, and the smell of good food coming from the kitchen. Benjamin and Diana looked at each other knowingly. They had been to a lot of places before, but this one felt different. They were met with a warm smile by a young lady. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm afraid not," Benjamin said, in a soft voice. She looked uncertain for a moment as she looked at her reservation book, and said, "We were hoping you might have a table available. Let me ask the manager. We're pretty busy tonight, but I'll see what I can do." Diana quickly left and squeezed Benjamin's hand. "What do you think so far, dear?" Benjamin's eyes looked around the room, taking in everything. "It's impressive, no doubt, but let's see how they handle unexpected guests. That's always telling." Henry Parker was proud as he stood near the bar and looked out over his busy restaurant. He worked hard all his life on the Golden Fork, and tonight it was buzzing with success. His eyes caught on an old couple who had just walked into the room. As he looked around, Benjamin and Diana Thompson stood in the doorway, hoping someone would come help them. When Henry looked at them, he wrinkled his face. Diana was wearing a checkered shirt and a necklace that Henry thought was fake. Benjamin, on the other hand, was wearing a simple suit and black pants in Henry's eyes. An old suit and tie that didn't fit right and looked like it had been borrowed. They didn't seem to fit in with his normal, wealthy customers. He moved quickly to the hostess stand, where a woman was about to see if there was a table open. Henry told her softly, "I take care of this," and waved her off. Henry walked up to the couple with his most charming smile on. He said, "Good evening," in a smooth voice. "I'm Henry Parker, the owner. I understand you're hoping for a table." Benjamin nodded, and his face looked calm and polite. "Yes, if that's possible. We've heard great things about your restaurant." Henry kept his smile, but his eyes got a little darker. He looked around the room and saw that some of the tables were empty, because they were being held for later orders. His thought was that these were for the right kind of people, not an old couple, dressed in old clothes who might bring down the mood of his business. Henry said, "I'm so sorry," but his voice was full of fake sorrow. "We're fully booked for the evening. Perhaps I could recommend a lovely diner just down the street. They have excellent comfort food." Benjamin and Diana looked at each other, and Diana's eyebrows went up a little. They both saw that there were empty tables all over the place. Henry, not aware of what they were saying, went on, "It's just that we have a very specific clientele, you understand. We cater to a certain ambience." Benjamin's face stayed blank, but there was maybe a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "I see," he said in a low voice. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Parker." Henry felt a little happy as the couple turned to leave. He had made sure that the Golden Fork stayed a private place. He had no idea that his narrow-minded views had just caused him to turn down two of the most important investors in the city. Benjamin and Diana walked out of the Golden Fork into the cool evening air. It was a big change from the hot place they had just been. They took slow, controlled steps. As they walked in silence for a while, Diana was the first to talk. She had a soft voice that did not sound happy. "Well, that was certainly an experience, wasn't it?" Benjamin nodded, but his wise eyes were cloudy with a lot of different feelings. As they walked down the path, they put their hands together in a sign of comfort and unity. "Indeed it was, my dear, not quite what we were hoping for." The street was full of people having fun at night, but the couple seemed to be alone and peaceful. Diana spoke with some thought, "You know, I can't help but wonder how many other people with dreams, ideas, and potential have been turned away like that." Benjamin gave her a light squeeze. They stopped at a street corner to wait for the light to change. "It's a shame that Mr. Parker doesn't know what he's missing out on by judging people so quickly," she said. Diana gave her husband a small smile as she looked up at him. "Should we have told him who we are?" Benjamin let out a soft laugh and shook his head. "No, I don't think so. Not yet, anyway. Sometimes people need to learn their lessons the hard way." Diana's face became more determined as they crossed the street. "You're right, but that doesn't mean we can't do something about it." Benjamin nodded, and his eyes showed that he was interested. "What did you have in mind, my love?" "Well," Diana said with a lowered voice, "we came here to watch, didn't we? I think we've seen enough to make a choice. But maybe there's more we can do than just invest or walk away." After years of working together, they could connect without words. At that moment, they both knew they wouldn't tell anyone who they really were just yet. Before they showed their hand, there was more to learn and do. As the couple walked on, their sadness started to fade and be replaced by a sense of purpose. Even though Benjamin and Diana Thompson were turned away from the Golden Fork, they were not down. If they were treated badly, they always found a way to make things better. Not just for themselves, but for everyone else as well. As the last customer left the Golden Plate, Henry Parker stood near the front door and smiled as he looked out over his property. The polished surfaces let the soft glow of the lights shine back at you, making the room feel luxurious and classy. After taking a big breath, he inhaled the smell of fine food and expensive wine. He thought to himself, another successful evening, as he straightened his designer tie. Henry's thoughts went back to the old couple he had turned away before. Some doubt crossed his mind for a split second, but he quickly pushed it away. He was sure that the choice he had made was the right one. He thought with a frown, "Can't let just anyone in. This place needs to keep up its good name," he said, as he walked through the eating area, and ran his hand along the back of a soft leather chair. He could picture his regular customers, the rich and famous of the city, wearing their best clothes, drinking champagne, and talking about huge deals worth millions of dollars. The picture made him smile in a cocky way. Those two wouldn't have fit in here, Henry thought, as he shook his head. My customers expect a certain atmosphere. Make them feel bad. He went to the bar and poured himself a glass of premium whiskey. He gave himself an imaginary pat on the back for thinking quickly as he sipped the amber liquid. He thought that by doing this, he had protected the image of his restaurant and kept it private. Henry told himself, as he swirled his whiskey in his glass, "It's all about how you look." There was a soft clink as he put his empty glass on the bar. That's what makes us different from everyone else. That's why we're successful. Before he went to bed for the night, Henry's eyes lit up with joy. He handled a situation that could have been awkward with style, living up to the high standards he had set for the golden plate. Tomorrow is another day, he told himself as he turned off the lights. Another chance to impress the right people and get that investment. Henry took one last look at his carefully chosen restaurant and then walked out into the night, completely sure of his own goodness and business sense. Henry walked into the golden plate with extra spring in his step. The next morning, he had just gotten an email that quickly made his heart beat fast. The investors he had been after for months finally agreed to meet with him. It was set for next week, and Henry was so excited he could hardly hold it in. He whispered to himself, "This is it," and a big smile spread across his face. As soon as Henry thought, "This is our chance to take the golden plate to the next level," he called a meeting of his team right away. As they crowded around him in the spotless kitchen, he told them the news with a smile that was hard to hide. "Listen up, everyone," he called out, clapping his hands to get his attention. "Big news. The investors are coming next week, and we need to make sure everything is just right." He paced back and forth, eager to think of new ideas. Henry looked at Marco, his head cook, and said, "I want this place to be spotless. Every fork and glass should sparkle. We need to show them that we're ready to grow. I need you to make a special menu that shows off our best dishes and hints at new, exciting flavors that we might be able to add in the future. We want to amaze them with what we can do now and what we might be able to do in the future." Marco happily agreed and began writing down ideas in his notebook. Henry then talked to his boss, Mina. "I need you to carefully go over our finances and put together a presentation that shows how much we've grown over the past few years. Include our busiest nights, our most popular dishes, and anything else that shows we're a success story ready to take off across the country." Mina gave a firm nod, her mind already prepared with the information they would need to gather. Henry went back to his office as the rest of the staff left to start getting ready. He sat down at his desk and took out a nice leather folder. Inside were his carefully thought out plans for growth, including floor plans for bigger restaurants, mock-ups of new menus, and predictions of how much money he would make in the future. As Henry continued to make plans for the big meeting with investors, his energy showed in the way he talked to the staff. He had to talk about his big plans for the future of the golden plate. "Just imagine," he told a group of servers as they met before their shift. "We could open golden plates in all of the big cities: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Sky's the limit." The servers smiled and nodded, but their looks showed a range of feelings. Some of them couldn't help but feel uneasy, even though they respected Henry's drive and saw room for growth. At the end of the day, Henry was caught talking to Marco about his plans for a more exclusive clientele in the kitchen. Henry spoke over the noise of the busy kitchen. "Once we grow, we'll be able to be even pickier about our guests," Henry said, No more worrying about people who don't fit our image walking through those doors. Mina, who was nearby looking over some papers, gave Henry a small frown. She remembered the old couple from the night before, and how they were turned away. She didn't agree with it, but she was afraid to say anything. While they were on break, a small group of employees met in the employee lounge. They talked about Henry's big plans and recent behavior. Jake, a young waiter, said, "I mean, it's great that he's so driven. But sometimes I wonder if he's losing sight of what really matters in this business." Sarah, a seasoned server, agreed. "I know what you mean. Did you see that couple he turned away last night? They seemed so nice. It just didn't feel right. I get that he wants to keep up a certain image," Mina said, after hearing what they were saying. "But I think he judges too quickly sometimes. We could miss out on some great guests." Everyone in the group was thinking about their own plans for the future of the Golden Plate and their part in it. For a moment, they respected Henry's drive and success, but they couldn't get rid of the feeling that in his quest for growth and exclusivity, he was missing something important. Finally, the day of the meeting with the investors came around. Henry Parker stood in front of his mirror and fixed his tie a third time. In the mirror, he saw a man who was full of confidence, and his eyes were sparkling with excitement. He ran his hand through his perfectly ironed suit and smiled at himself. He told himself, "Today is the day." When Henry drove to the investor's office, he thought, "Time to show them what the Golden Plate is all about." His mind was full of ideas and plans. He was sure his pitch was perfect because he had practiced it so many times. As he walked through the entrance, the sound of his shoes on the polished marble floor showed how determined he was. The front desk worker smiled at him. Henry smiled and said, "Mr. Parker, they're ready for you in the conference room." After taking a deep breath, he said, "Thank you, I appreciate it." He then pushed the heavy wooden door open. The conference room was impressive, and the view of the city, from the floor to ceiling windows, was breathtaking. 3 people were sitting at the far end of a long table. They didn't say anything as they watched him walk in. Henry finally looked at the 2 people at the head of the table. As he sat down in his chair, ready to give his well-rehearsed speech, his heart beat faster, and the color left his face. There, sitting down, were Benjamin and Diana Thompson, the older couple he had turned away from his restaurant a few days before. They looked at him with cool, knowing eyes. Henry's hands started to shake, and his mouth dried up. He lost the confident smile that had been on his face just moments before, and now had a look of shock and fear that was just starting to show. He leaned forward and put his hands on the table. "Mr. As Parker spoke, his voice was steady and authoritative. I think we've met before, though maybe not in the best of times." Diana looked at him with a mix of disappointment and interest in her eyes as she said, "We were interested in your restaurant, but it looks like we didn't quite fit the image you were going for that evening." Henry's mind was racing as he tried to make sense of this sudden change in events. The carefully thought-out plans and forecasts in the portfolio in front of him seemed pointless all of a sudden. He opened his mouth to talk, but nothing came out. Henry stuttered, not being able to speak clearly like he usually does. He could feel a drop of sweat running down his back as the full weight of his mistake hit him. Benjamin gave me a strange look. "Mr. Parker, please keep going with your presentation. Have you thought about what you want the Golden Plate to be?" The papers in Henry's folder fell out of his hands as he tried to open it. They were all over the table. As he rushed to get them, he could feel the heat of shame rising up his neck. "I'm sorry," Henry finally said, but his voice was barely above a whisper. "I have no idea where to start." Diana asked, "Could you start by telling us about your restaurant's values? And how you treat all of your potential customers?" Her voice was soft but firm. Henry lost his thought. He had practiced the pitch a lot, but now it felt empty and pointless. He felt sick to his stomach when he realized he had made A terrible mistake that could cost him not only this business chance, but also everything he had worked for. As Henry tried to find the right words, his heart was beating fast. He didn't have his normal charm and confidence, and Benjamin and Diana's steady looks made him feel small and exposed. Henry finally said, his voice shaking, "I'm so sorry. I did something wrong. I was wrong to treat you because I made a bad assumption." Benjamin slowly nodded, but you couldn't tell how he felt. "Mr. Parker, our business has been successful because we treat everyone with respect. We don't put money into companies that make snap decisions about people based on how they look." When Henry made a mistake, he felt like the weight of it was crushing him. As he looked, years of hard work and hopes for growth seemed to fall apart. Diana leaned forward and her eyes got a little softer. "Henry," she called him by his first name, "we've seen a lot of people mess up in our time. The important thing is how they learn and grow from them." Henry felt a small spark of hope in his heart. He raised his head and met Diana's in her eyes. "We're willing to give you a second chance," Diana said, in a firm but kind voice. "But you'll have to show that you can change not only what you do, but also how you think." Henry quickly nodded, and a sense of relief came over him. "Of course, I'll do anything. I want to get better." Benjamin gave me a strange look. "It's not going to be simple, Michael. It takes time and real work to change habits and ways of thinking that are deeply ingrained. Are you really ready for that?" As Henry took a big breath, the full weight of the moment hit him. He saw that this was about more than just getting an investment. It was about growing as a person and as a leader. Henry said, "I am," his voice getting stronger. "I know I need to learn a lot, but I'm ready to do the work. I want to open a place where everyone feels welcome, not just people who look a certain way." Diana looked at Benjamin for a moment and then turned back to Henry. She said, "Very well. We're ready to give you that chance, but please know that we'll be closely watching to see if what you do matches what you say." Diana leaned back in her chair and looked at me with eyes that were both hopeful and full of challenge. "Henry," she told him in a soft but strong voice, "we have an idea for you." Henry sat up straighter, and his heart was racing with excitement. He said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "I'm listening." Nicole told him, "We'd like you to host a community event at your restaurant, but not just any event. We want you to welcome people who are often discriminated against, or who come from backgrounds that are on the outside." Henry's eyes got bigger, and he felt a little uneasy inside, but he pushed it away. "What kind of event did you want to plan?" He tried to keep his voice steady as he asked. Benjamin spoke up, and the room echoed with his deep voice. "It could be a dinner or a party. It's important to make a place where everyone feels welcome, no matter what they look like, where they come from, or their social status." Diana agreed and nodded. "Now is your chance to prove to us and yourself that you really want to change. If you can show that you truly welcome and value all of your guests, we'll think again about investing in your plans to grow." Henry took a big breath and thought about what they had said. He saw that this was about more than just getting money. It was about growing as a person and as a leader. Henry spoke slowly and said, "Yeah, I think I understand. You want me to show that I can make a place where everyone, no matter who they are, feels welcome and important." "That's right," Diana replied, with a smile. "Henry, it's not enough to just say the right things. You have to do something and really open your heart to others." Henry nodded. He was both scared and determined at the same time. He said, with a stronger voice, "Okay, I'll do it. This is something I want to learn and grow from." Benjamin leaned forward. He looked serious, but not mean. "Don't forget, Henry, this isn't just for one night. How you run your business and treat people will need to change for good." Henry looked Benjamin in the eyes and said, "I understand. I'm ready to work hard and make real changes because it's the right thing, just because it will make me money." Diana's smile got bigger. "We like hearing that, Henry. Allow us to now talk about the specifics of this event. When Henry left the meeting with Benjamin and Diana, he was very upset. The things he did in the past were pulling at him, but the hope of their investment kept him going. Not only for his business, but also to show he could change. He knew he had to make this neighborhood event work. Henry got his staff together back at the kitchen. He tried to sound excited when he said, "We're going to have a special event. It won't be the same crowd we usually have." His workers looked at each other with interest. After taking a big breath, Henry said, "We're inviting people from all walks of life who might not normally come here." Henry looked quickly around the room as he spoke, taking in the shiny surfaces and expensive decorations. He couldn't help but think about how this event might change the image he had worked so hard to build. Henry worked hard on making plans over the next few days. There was a voice in the back of his mind that kept telling him of the real reason for all this work. While he worked on guest lists, menu ideas, and marketing plans, he said to himself one night, as he hunched over his desk, "Just impress the investors. Just show them what they want to see, and the expansion will be done." Henry's workers noticed that he was getting more serious. They saw him worry about everything, from the music playing in the background to the way the tables were set. But something wasn't right. He seemed to care less about making everyone feel welcome and more about putting on a great show. One afternoon, Henry was reading over the event menu a third time when Maria, his head cook, spoke up. "May I ask you something, boss?" She said it hesitantly. Henry took a moment to look up. "What is it?" "The point of this event is to make everyone feel welcome, right? But it seems like we're just throwing another nice dinner for rich people. What do we really want to change?" Henry looked at Maria, and what she said hit him like a cold wave. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. He knew she was right inside. He softly said, I don't know," his shoulders dropping. "I don't know anything about this." Maria's face turned softer. She put a soft hand on Henry's arm. "Yes, boss, everyone makes mistakes sometimes. But this event could be really great if we do it right." Henry gave a slow nod, his thoughts racing. When he turned to look at his staff, he saw their worried faces for the first time. "What do you all think? What is it?" he asked, his voice sounding unsure for some reason. He was shocked when his team started to talk to him. People talked about times when they didn't feel welcome or were being judged. They also gave ideas for how to make the place truly welcoming. The Sue's cook, Carlos, said, "We could have a varied menu. Foods from different cultures, not just fancy French cuisine. And maybe we could showcase local artists from underrepresented communities," Sarah, the host, said. As Henry's team continued to come up with ideas, he felt a range of emotions: pride in how caring his team was, shame for how he had behaved in the past, and a spark of excitement at the possibilities. But he still had doubts. Could he really change? Would people think he was telling the truth? What if he messed up again? Maria spoke up again because she could tell he was upset. "It's okay to be scared, boss. Change is hard, but we're all here to help. This event could be a chance for all of us to grow, just a business deal." Henry looked at his team, who had smiles on their faces full of hope and support. He felt a real smile on his lips for the first time since the meeting with Benjamin and Diana. "You're right," he said, as he stood up. As they got back to planning, Henry felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "Let's do this right. Not for the investors, but for our community, for all of us." He had a long way to go, but his team was ready to help him take the first step toward real change. Benjamin and Diana kept a close eye on Henry's restaurant over the course of the days. They picked a small cafe across the street as their observation point. While they sipped coffee and talked quietly, they watched people come and go. Benjamin whispered, "Look at that," one afternoon, as he pointed to the door to the restaurant. A group of workers was putting up a big, bright banner that told people about an upcoming community event. Diana leaned forward, and her eyes were bright with interest. Well, I'll be. He's really going to do it. They watched Henry walk out of the restaurant and point excitedly at the workers. There was a lot of worry in his face because he kept running his hand through his hair. With a low, serious voice, Benjamin said, "He seems torn." Diana gave a nod and looked straight at Henry. Diana and Benjamin saw more changes over the next few days. It must be hard for him to change after all this time. But look, he's trying. They saw Henry chatting with a variety of local artists about what they were going to do for the event. They saw him shaking hands with the owner of a nearby community center. The next day, Diana said, "He's reaching out," and her voice had a hint of acceptance. Benjamin agreed with a hum, but his face stayed guarded. "That's a good sign." "It is, but we'll need to see if these changes stick after the event." As the day of the community meeting got closer, Henry seemed to change how he was acting. They saw that he was smiling more, and that his relationships with his staff were getting friendlier and less tense. Diana said quietly, "I think he's starting to see the value in this." Her words were filled with hope. Benjamin gave her a light squeeze. "Let's hope so, Mayor, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll see how the event goes." They saw Henry stand outside his restaurant and look at the preparations. He looked worried and determined at the same time. His right thing was clear, even though he wasn't sure how. Henry's stomach was in knots when the night of the neighborhood event finally came around. He fumbled with his tie as he stood at the door of his restaurant and watched as people came in. The crowd was different from anything he had seen in his business before. A very old woman with worn-out hands and a friendly smile was one of the first people to come in. As she walked by, she thanked Henry for inviting her by patting his arm. Then came a group of young adults in wheelchairs, whose laughter could be heard throughout the hall. Henry's eyes got really big when he saw a homeless man, who was wearing torn clothes but had a happy face, hesitantly cross the doorway. "Welcome," Henry said, and his voice cracked a little. "Please come in." As more people came in, Henry felt a mix of feelings he couldn't quite put his finger on. He was worried, but he also felt a strange warmth rising in his chest. Across all walks of life, he saw people mixing, telling stories, and breaking bread with each other. A young woman with bright blue hair and eyes that sparkled walked up to Henry. She gushed, "This is amazing. I never thought I'd be welcome in a place like this." Henry swallowed hard, and his throat got lumpy. He said, "I'm glad you're here," and was surprised that he really meant it. Henry got involved in talks that he never would have thought he'd be having in his restaurant as the night went on. He talked to a refugee family about their trip to America, and heard to a former gang member talk about how he helps at-risk teens. The air was filled with the sounds of laughing and animated conversation, making it feel warm and welcoming. Henry looked around and saw that his restaurant, which was usually spotless, had been turned into a lively, welcoming place for everyone. Then he saw Benjamin and Diana sitting quietly at a corner table and watching. They looked at him, and with a small nod, they let him know they saw him. Henry felt a lot of different feelings at once. He felt bad about what he had done in the past, thankful for this second chance, and increasingly aware that something deep inside him was changing. As the event went on, Henry found himself standing in a strange way near the bar, and watching the different kinds of people interact with each other. He wasn't as sure of himself as he usually was. Instead, he was worried and fidgeting with his cufflinks. There was a young man in a wheelchair who came up and balanced a plate of snacks on his lap. With a smile, he told Henry, "These are delicious. Did you make them yourself?" Henry cleared his throat, but his voice was rough. Henry felt a bead of sweat form on his forehead as the talk stopped. No, our chef did. I'm glad you like them." He tried very hard to think of something to say, but he couldn't. A tall woman with a cane was having a hard time reaching a high table across the room. Henry saw how bad things were for her and wasn't sure if he should help. He thought about it for a moment, and then walked over quickly. "Ma'am, would you like some help?" he asked in a professional rather than friendly voice. The woman gave him a nice look. "Oh, that would be lovely, dear. These old bones aren't what they used to be." Henry helped her to a lower table in a way that was awkward and almost knocked over a glass. He wasn't himself and felt awkward, which was very different from how he usually acts. As Henry walked through the crowd, he kept getting into conversations that made him feel like he didn't understand what was going on. He politely nodded as a group of refugees talked about their home countries. They were having a hard time finding things they had in common or asking good questions. It was clear that Henry was uncomfortable when a homeless guy thanked him for the meal. His answer was mumbled, and he quickly excused himself, saying he had to check on the food in the kitchen. Henry took a big breath as he stood alone in the busy kitchen. There was laughing and chatter coming from the dining room, which was very different from how tense he felt inside. He understood that even though he agreed to host the event at first, he was not at all ready for meeting people whose lives were so different from his own. Henry was trying to calm down in the kitchen when he heard the door open behind him. When he turned around, he saw a woman in her mid-40s comes in with an empty tray. She was wearing simple, clean clothes. "Excuse me," she said, in a low voice. Henry pointed to a nearby counter and said, "I was just looking for a place to put this." "Of course, you can leave it there." The woman smiled, thanked her, and put the tray down. As she turned to leave, she stopped and looked at Henry with eyes that seemed to know him. "Aren't you the owner?" asked the woman. Henry nodded, but his discomfort was clear. The woman smiled and said, "Yes, I am." Henry stopped what she was saying when she said, "I just wanted to thank you for hosting this event. It means more than you might realize." He said, "Oh," with growing interest, even though he felt uneasy. She leaned against the counter and nodded. "I've been turned away from places like this before," she said. "People judge me based on what I wear or the color of my skin. It's not easy." Henry felt guilty as he thought about how he had reacted in the past. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said in a lower voice. "That's life," she said, with a shrug. "I have 2 jobs and go to night school at the same time. One day I'll have my own business," she said. As she spoke, Henry found himself really listening. The determination in her eyes and the strength in her stance were very different from what he had thought about people like her in the past. "That's admirable," Henry said, surprised by how sincere his voice sounded. "Thank you," the woman said, with a smile. "Nights like this remind me that there is kindness in the world. And that maybe things are changing," Henry said. Henry felt a lump in his throat as he thought about how close he had been to turning this woman away, just like he had Benjamin and Diana. The thought hit him hard, and a wave of shame went through him. "I'm glad you're here," he said, with a heavy heart. "Thank you for telling me your story." She put her hand on his arm and said, "Thank you for listening." As she walked away, Henry stood there, moved by what she said. He felt something change inside him, a crack in the wall of prejudice he had built around himself. That night, for the first time, he really wanted to connect with his guests and learn from them instead of judging them. As the night went on, Henry became more interested in talking to the other guests. Each chat broke down the walls he had built around his heart and mind. An old man with weathered hands and a friendly smile walked up to Henry. He said, with twinkling eyes, "This food tastes great. It makes me think of the meals my grandmother used to make." Henry smiled and said, "Thank you. That's a nice praise." The man nodded. "You know, I've been a janitor for 40 years and have never missed a day of work. But I've been kicked out of places like this so many times I've lost count." A sad look took the place of Henry's smile as he said, "I'm sorry to hear that." The man replied, "Oh, don't be. It's taught me to appreciate the good times even more, like tonight." As Henry listened, he felt a twinge in his chest. As he thought about how many times he might have missed someone like this kind, hard-working man. Later, a young woman wearing a hijab came up to Henry and said, thank you for this evening. It's not often I feel so welcome in a place like this." Henry nodded, but he had a lump in his throat. "I'm glad you're here," he managed to say. The woman smiled. "You know, studying to be a doctor. But sometimes people will only see my headscarf, and not my dreams or my hard work." As Henry listened to more stories throughout the night, he felt something change inside him. He heard stories of people who were strong in the face of prejudice and discrimination, and of people who followed their dreams despite many obstacles. Each story was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. By the end of the evening, Henry's heart had softened a great deal. He looked around the restaurant and saw not a threat to his image, but a room full of amazing people. The weight of his own prejudice weighed heavily on his conscience. As the event came to an end, Henry stood near the door and watched the guests leave with happy faces and hearts full. He had a lot of different feelings going through his mind. Regret for what he had done in the past, thanks for the experience that had opened his eyes, and respect for the different kinds of people he had met. A young guy in a wheelchair walked up to Henry and put out his hand. He said, "Thank you for this evening." Henry shook his hand and said, "It means more than you know." He felt a lump in his mouth. He said in a soft voice, "No, thank you. I'm the one who's learned so much tonight." As the last of the guests left, Henry looked around the restaurant. There were a lot of empty plates and half-full drinks on the tables, which showed that a happy party had. His mind went to the mess, but it didn't bother him as much as it used to. Instead, it seemed like a sign of how warm and welcoming his eatery had been. Henry's staff crowded around him, and they were all very proud. One of them said, "That was great, boss." A small smile played across Henry's lips as he said, "Did you see how happy everyone was?" "Yes," he said, "but I saw so much more than that. I saw strength, resilience, and kindness in every person who walked through those doors tonight." He looked at his team and felt humble. He told her, "I was wrong. So wrong in how I've judged people. Tonight showed me that there's value in every person, no matter where they come from or what they look like." His employees looked at each other with surprise because they weren't used to hearing their boss talk so freely about how he felt. Henry went on, his speech full of emotion. "Each person here tonight had a story, dream, a struggle, and yet, they all showed such grace and dignity. I've been blind to that for so long, focused only on appearances and what I thought success looked like." Benjamin and Diana Thompson made their way through the restaurant to find Henry as the event was coming to a close. They looked around at the scene, tables that still showed signs of lively talks, servers who were still smiling as they cleared plates, and Henry, standing near the door, who looked both tired and excited. When Henry saw the couple coming up behind him, his heart skipped a beat. He stood up straight and nervously smoothed down his shirt. He couldn't help but notice the love in their eyes as they got closer. It was so different from how cool and polite they had been before. When Henry spoke to them, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, his voice was a mix of respect and fear. "I hope you had a good evening," she said. Benjamin nodded and smiled a little. "It was quite an event, Mr. Parker," he said in a cool, deep voice. "We've been observing throughout the night." Nicole added, her voice and her tone was soft but strong. "We've seen quite a transformation in you, Henry. The way you interacted with the guests, really listened to their stories. It was a far cry from the man we first encountered." Henry felt a lump in his throat. He said in a deep voice, "I can't even begin to explain how sorry I am for what I did that day. I was so wrong, so blind. This event, these people, they've opened my eyes to so much." Benjamin put his hand on Henry's shoulder to make him feel better. "What matters now is what you do with this new understanding," he stated. "Change isn't easy, but it's clear you've taken the first steps. We're impressed by how hard you've worked," Diana said with a smile. "It's not often that we see someone so willing to face their own biases head-on." Henry nodded, feeling both calm and worried. He said, "Thank you," in a low voice. "I know I still have a long way to go, but I'm committed to doing better, to being better." Benjamin and Diana looked at each other and spoke to each other in silence. "We appreciate your honesty," Henry told Benjamin and Diana. He was worried and thankful at the same time. "I'd be honored if you could join me for a private dinner here at the restaurant," he said, though his voice was a little shaky. "I'd love to hear more about your experiences, if you're willing to share." The two looked at each other warmly, and Diana answered, "We'd love to, Henry. Thanks for the invite." After a few days, Henry invited Benjamin and Diana to a cozy private dining room. Elegantly set, the table was lit by soft candles that gave it a warm glow. As they got comfortable, Henry had a strange mix of feelings: respect, interest, and shame for what he had done in the past. Benjamin leaned back in his chair as the first dish was brought out. His eyes were far away with memories. He began with a strong voice that was quiet but firm. "You know, Henry, when Diana and I started our business, there were more closed doors than open ones." Diana agreed and reached out to squeeze her husband's hand. "It wasn't just about being black," she said. "It was about being black and ambitious in a world that didn't expect much from us." Henry paid close attention and forgot about his food. Benjamin said, "There was this one time early in our career when we went to a bank for a loan. The manager took one look at us and assumed we were there to clean the place." His eyes were sparkling with a mix of mischief and old pain. "No matter how nice we looked on Sunday, or how much money we had, he couldn't get past the color of our skin." Henry felt bad when he thought about how he had recently behaved in the story. "How did you deal with it?" he asked in a soft voice. Walt smiled, and he looked proud in a quiet way. "We didn't get mad or leave. On the contrary, we sat down calmly, and then gave the best business pitch the boss had ever seen." "It wasn't easy," Diana said, "but we knew it would take time and effort to change their minds. To get half as far, we had to be twice as good." Benjamin and Diana told more stories as the night went on. These stories were about how they overcame prejudice with grace and dignity, of small wins and crushing defeats. Henry listened, and his heart was heavy with new respect and understanding. When the main meal came out, Benjamin and Diana kept talking about their lives. It was clear from what they said that the world had been mean to them at times, but they didn't sound angry. There was that time, Benjamin remembered, his eyes twinkling with a mix of old pain and laughter. "We had just gotten a big contract. To celebrate, we went to a fancy diner like this one." Diana picked up the story with a nod. "After one look at us, the host tried to lead us to the kitchen door. He thought we were there to look for work and not to eat." The story made Henry wince because it was so true. He felt a wave of shame wash over him as he thought about what he had done recently. "We've lost count of the times people thought Diana was my assistant instead of my equal partner and co-CEO," Benjamin said. "Or the times clients would only talk to Benjamin and ignore me completely." She also said, "As if being a woman and black made me invisible or unable." Henry leaned in close and heard they said. He was amazed at how much their stories reminded him of the ones he had heard at the neighborhood event. It made him think of the woman who had told her story of being discriminated against. And he felt a new connection to her. "Fight. What kept you going?" "What?" Henry asked, in a voice that was almost a whisper. Walt smiled, and he looked strong in a quiet way. "We were sure our offer was valuable. We couldn't let the narrow-mindedness of other people stop us from making our dreams come true." Diana put out her hand and rubbed Henry's. "That's because we knew that every time we did well, opened doors for others to follow." Henry felt a deep change inside him as he listened. His life was changing because of Benjamin and Diana's stories, and what he learned at the neighborhood event. He changed the way he saw the world because he knew how heavy bias was and how strong it was to get rid of it. Henry leaned back in his chair, and tears were still in his eyes. The weight of Benjamin and Diana's words and The memories of the community event weighed heavy on his heart. He took a deep breath and put his napkin on the table, his hands shaking a little. I don't know what to say, Henry said, his voice heavy with feeling. Listening to your stories and hearing about the problems you've had has opened my eyes in ways I didn't expect. Benjamin and Diana gave each other a soft look, which let Henry continue. I'm very sorry for how I treated you the first time you came to my restaurant, Henry said, his cheeks turning red. Not just you, but also a lot of other people I've wrongly judged over the years. He paused to collect his thoughts. The open house event changed my whole life. So many amazing people I met, and each had their own story of being strong and able to bounce back from hard times. It showed me how narrow-minded I've been and how much I've missed by judging people based on how they look or what I think about them. As Henry talked, his voice got stronger. I thought I knew what success looked like when I was running this restaurant. But now I see that it's not just about making money or keeping people out. It's about making a place where everyone feels welcome and important. With a comforting smile, Diana reached out and patted Henry's hand again. Henry, admitting your mistake is the first step toward making things better. Yes, you're right, Henry said, with a determined look on his face. I also want to change. There's more to my desire to improve than just making money. It's also the right thing to do. Benjamin and Diana looked at each other deeply, and the look in their eyes told a story. After a short pause, Benjamin cleared his throat, leaned forward, and looked at Henry with wise eyes. His voice was steady and warm as he said, Henry, you've changed a lot, they said. You should be proud of your desire to learn and grow. Diana smiled to herself and nodded to show that she agreed. Henry, we believe in you, and we believe in second chances. Henry's chest swelled with hope as his heart beat fast. He didn't breathe out until they said something else. Benjamin told her, we've decided to invest in your restaurant. He said it in a serious but encouraging way. Henry's eyes got bigger, and he felt a rush of relief and happiness. Thank you, he said, his joy almost too much to handle. I promise this choice won't be a mistake. Diana softly raised her hand to show that she had more to say. However, she said, in a soft but firm voice, our investment comes with a moral expectation. Henry stood up straight and paid full attention to them. Now, he knew it wasn't just about money. Benjamin said, we want you to keep supporting your community and promoting inclusion. Henry, this isn't just about growing your business. It's about making a place where everyone feels welcome and where the community can get help. Diana said, we've seen how good things can get when you let everyone into your heart and home. We want that to keep going and get bigger. Henry honestly agreed, and his eyes were shining with purpose. I fully understand, he said, his voice full of passion. And I want you to know that this isn't just about keeping your money safe. The things I've learned and the people I've met have changed me. I want to be and do better. Benjamin and Diana smiled because they thought Henry was being honest. They could tell that he had changed for real, that he had found a new reason in life besides making money. Benjamin reached out to shake Henry's hand and said, that's exactly what we hope to hear. Together, we can make something truly unique. A restaurant that not only serves great food, but also helps the people. As Henry left the meeting with Benjamin and Diana, his heart was full of thanks and joy. They put a lot of trust in him, which was both exciting and scary. He had a lot of thoughts going through his head as he walked back to his business. When Henry got there, the first thing he did was get his team together. He stood in front of them, his eyes shining with renewed drive. He was very excited as he spoke. We're going to have some big changes coming, and I'm going to need all of your help. He told them about the investment and the promise he had made to Benjamin and Diana. Some of the staff looked at each other with surprise because they remembered how Henry had been before. But as they listened to him talk, they could see that their boss had really changed. Our doors are open to everyone from now on, Henry said. Don't make decisions based on opinions or how someone looks. We're going to make a spot where everyone feels welcome and important." Henry worked hard on making plans over the next few days. He worked at his desk for hours, taking notes and calling people. He talked to leaders in the community to get their ideas on how the business could better serve a wide range of people. The menu at a diner caught Henry's eye one afternoon. He saw that it didn't show the variety he wanted to promote. He picked up the phone and called his head cook with a firm nod. "We need to change our menu," Henry exclaimed with excitement. "Let's add dishes from different cultures and make sure there are options for people with different dietary needs. I want our food to feel as friendly as our place does." The chef was shocked at first, but quickly warmed up to the plan. They began to talk about new recipes and flavor combinations that would please a bigger range of people. Henry also chose to change how the restaurants inside looked. He wanted to make a place where everyone felt welcome and warm. He hired a group of different local artists to make paintings that show off the area's rich cultural diversity. As the changes took shape, Henry felt a pride that was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about making a place where people cared and where they could come together. With Benjamin and Diana's help and advice, Henry set out to make his restaurant a place where everyone felt welcome. He chose to start an event every month that would bring people from all walks of life together. Henry reached out to nearby groups, eager to work with them on this new project. He talked to Sarah, who ran a shelter for the poor, and Mark, who ran a program to teach at-risk teens how to get jobs. They talked about how to make the biggest difference as a group. "Once a month, we'll have a special dinner," Henry said, his eyes shining with joy. "We'll invite people from different walks of life, those who might not normally get to enjoy fine dining." Sarah gave a happy nod. "That's great, Henry. A lot of the people who live in our home have never eaten at a place like this before." Mark added, "And what about job openings? Some of these people only need a chance to show what they can do." Henry smiled, and he could feel a warmth going through his chest. "Certainly, there will also be job openings. We might start with training or part-time jobs." The first event for the neighborhood was planned for the following month. Henry and his team worked very hard to get ready. They made a menu that was friendly and accommodating for people with different dietary needs and cultural interests. There were bright posters outside the restaurant that said, "All are welcome here." When the event night came around, Henry stood uncomfortably at the door and smiled at every guest. Lots of people came from all over the neighborhood. Families from the shelter, young adults from Mark's program, seniors from the local senior center, and other people who had heard about the event. Over the course of the evening, Henry went from table to table, laughing and listening to stories. People who wouldn't normally be friends became friends with each other. For example, a businessman was talking to a veteran who used to be homeless, and a teenager was showing an older woman how to take a selfie. At one point, Henry saw Benjamin and Diana sitting quietly in a corner and smiling as they watched what was going on. They gave him a thumbs up, which made Henry feel very thankful that they had helped him and believed in him. As the months went by, Henry's diner changed into a place where everyone felt welcome and cared for. Some people in the area looked forward to the monthly community events all month long. They brought together people from all walks of life to share food and stories. Henry's once narrow view of what it meant to be successful started to change. He wasn't judging his worth by how much money the business made or how few people went there. Instead, he found happiness in the smiles of people who had never felt welcome in a place like that before. One night, Henry felt very proud as he watched a group of teenagers serve tables very well. These young people, who had been ignored by society before, were now doing very well with his help. Benjamin came up to Henry and said, "You've really turned things around here." Henry said yes, and his eyes got wet. He said, "I never knew success could feel this good." Diana smiled and joined them. It's no longer just about the food, is it? Henry agreed and said, "No, it's about the people and the neighborhood. Not only for its delicious food, but also for its kind heart, the restaurant became more well known. Because Henry did it, other companies in the area started to pay attention. Some even got in touch and asked what they could do to help. Henry found himself giving talks at community events about how he went from being exclusive to being open to everyone. He told the truth about the mistakes he had made and the important lessons he had learned. It's not enough to just do well for yourself, he would say. It's about helping other people along the way. The neighborhood around the diner grew as well. Henry started a scholarship program for poor people who want to become cooks. He worked with nearby farmers to get the food he needed, which helped small companies. The tables that Henry had been so careful to keep empty were now full of a wide range of customers. It was loud and full of laughter and lively talk. Everyone who walked through the doors could feel the warm and friendly atmosphere. Henry's idea of what success meant had grown. It now included the single mother who got stable work in his kitchen, the homeless soldier who got his confidence back as a host, and the at-risk teens who found their love for cooking. People all over the city quickly heard about how the place had been changed. A lot of different kinds of people started going to Henry's place, not just because the food was good, but also because it felt like a friendly neighborhood. Every night, the restaurant was full of a wide range of people. People in nice clothes from business sat next to families with young children, and older couples sat next to college students. There was a lot of laughter and lively talk in many languages. She used to feel out of place in fancy restaurants because she was a single mom, but now she felt right at home. As a treat every Friday night, she brought her son Mike. One night, she told Henry, her eyes filled with tears of thanks, "This place makes us feel like we belong." The restaurant became known for more than just its food. It was known as a place where strangers became friends, where differences were honored, and where everyone was treated with kindness and respect. Leaders in the area started to pay attention. They saw how Henry's business helped people get along with each other and break down social barriers. Members of the city council, church leaders, and activists all praised the business as an example of how to be welcoming to everyone. It was easy for people who didn't like the idea of eating with a more diverse group of people to become interested in the restaurant's atmosphere. Many of them said that their experiences there had made them question and change what they thought they knew. Other companies in the area were inspired by how well the restaurant did. Similar welcoming actions were taken by cafes, bookstores, and shops, which spread through the community. Henry was amazed as his restaurant turned into more than just a place to eat. It became a sign of unity in a split world, a lighthouse of hope for people who had felt left out for a long time. One late night, Henry sat in his office and looked out the window at the busy restaurant below. Different people's laughing and chatter blew up to him and warmed his heart in a way he had never felt before. He thought about the selfish, driven, and aggressive person he used to be. A sad smile played across his face as he thought about how he had once turned Benjamin and Diane away because of how they looked. It was painful to remember, but it also showed him how far he'd come. Henry looked at a picture in a frame on his desk. It was from the first event he put on for the neighborhood, the one that made a big difference. People from all walks of life were around him in the picture. They were young and old, rich and poor, and of every race and background. Their happiness was clear, and Henry thought back to how that night had shown him a world he hadn't seen in a long time. He remembered all the stories he had heard since then, stories of hardship, strength, and victory. Each one had chipped away at his ideas about people, showing him that everyone who came through his doors had worth and respect on their own. As Henry thought about it, he realized that his idea of what success meant had changed in a big way. It wasn't about how many businesses he owned or how much money he had. He now knew that the real measure of his success was the number of lives he changed and the community he helped build. Among the people who had become like family were Martha and Mike. He could still see the tears in Martha's eyes as she told him they were welcome. In times like these, Henry felt a sense of purpose that he hadn't had in all the years he had been trying to make money. Henry got up and went to the window to see the lights of the city. He was filled with a deep gratitude for Benjamin and Diana, who saw potential in him even when he was at his worst, for his staff, who had helped him through his journey of change, and for everyone who had shared their story with him, which had caused his heart and mind to grow. Henry stood at the door with a genuine smile, greeting people as the sun went down, sending a warm glow through the restaurant's windows. The other community events were not like this one. Not as investors, Benjamin and Diana were here. They were here as guests and friends. The restaurant was full of lively conversation and laughs. People from all walks of life sat down together and shared stories over tasty food. Henry looked all around the room and was amazed at how different the people who were there were. Benjamin and Diana were talking with a young couple who had just moved into the area at a table in the middle of the room. Henry watched as Benjamin leaned in and offered words of support to the young man, as he talked about how hard it was for him to find work. As Henry moved through the crowd, he stopped to talk to people he knew and to greet people who were new. He got down on his knees next to an old woman's wheelchair and made sure she was okay and had everything she needed. The woman thanked him and patted his hand. Her eyes were sparkling with happiness. From across the room, Diana looked at Henry and gave him a warm thumbs up. Henry's chest swelled with happiness. Somehow, these two amazing people had become more than just investors. They were his teachers and guides on this path of personal growth and kindness. Henry stopped for a moment to take in what he saw. Lots of different kinds of people sat in the restaurant. Young and old, rich and poor, and people of all races and backgrounds. They laughed, shared, and got to know each other in ways that Henry, from just a few months ago, could not have imagined. From where he stood, Henry felt a deep satisfaction wash over him. He understood that the real success wasn't the plans for growth or the profit margins he used to be so focused on. It was the community he had helped build, the lives he had touched, and the hearts he had opened, including his own. Let me know in the comments section what interests you the most in this story. It takes me lots of time to put this story together for you. Kindly leave a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share this video. Also, check out our channel for more stories like this. Let's meet over there.